Hi guys, it's Freddie and welcome to my wardrobe. So today we're going to be doing something a little bit different and something that I hope we can do more frequently on this channel, and that is basically a sewing vlog, pretty much. Hi Blackjack. So for this first sewing vlog, I thought we would do something. Will you quit hitting my table? Yes, your toy is lovely. Your toy is lovely. And staying. Ooh. So for the first sewing vlog, I thought we would do something a little bit simple and economically friendly, considering it is just after the holidays and I am B-R-O-K-E broke. So we're going to use some fabric I had in my stash, which is this guy here. I got this on sale during Black Friday at Joann's, so all of their Christmas fabric was completely on sale. Completely, like 60% off, 70% off, I think. And I originally wanted to get enough of this fabric for a skirt. However, they didn't have enough and it was the only bolt left, so I got what they had left, which was I think 1.5 yards or a yard. And that's just enough for an underbust corset. So that is what I'm going to be doing instead with this fabric and what you guys will be seeing on this vlog. So we're using that fabric. It's very pretty, but it's plaid. I'm going to do my best to plaid match it. I don't know how well that's gonna turn out. I'm not great at pattern matching, but we'll see. And I am using this pattern for an underbust corset. For those of you who don't know, this particular pattern is by Corsets by Caroline, who is a fantastic corseteer, patterner, drafter, corset pattern drafter, corseteer, corset maker. And she has an entire Etsy shop of the patterns that she makes, and I absolutely love her patterns. I've made another corset of hers in this particular style. Well, not this style, but this particular pattern, because there's 3 different style variations to it for Halloween, which I may end up showing you guys. I don't know. We'll see. I don't want to go get it right now. Either way, I'll be using that. You print it out on computer paper, and then you tape it together like I have. Like this area right here is taped, and this area right here is taped. And there you go. It works. There's no seam allowance on these guys, so you have to add your own. Other than that though, I absolutely adore her patterns. They're very user-friendly, and they're also easy to adjust. So for instance, since I've already made a corset like this, I kind of know exactly what this is gonna fit like. And I do know that the underbust is about 2 inches too big, but everything else is fine. I have a very tiny underbust and bust area compared to my hips and waist. So I am going to have to take panels 3, 4, and 5 in on the top, which is fine because that's actually what I ended up having to do on the Halloween corset I made in the same pattern. But I'm gonna have to take it more in because I only did 1/4 inch on the last one because I didn't know exactly how much I needed to take in, and it was not enough. So I'm gonna double my efforts this time, and hopefully it all works out. This pattern does come with a modesty panel, but I am not going to be using that modesty panel simply because I plan on wearing all of my underbusts with other clothes. So I don't see the need for an underbust modesty. I don't see the need for a modesty panel, but for those wanting to purchase the pattern, that is available as well. I will have a link to Corsets by Caroline's Etsy shop down below, and I definitely recommend you checking out her patterns if you're interested in corsetry. I love them, they are fantastic. So without further ado, I think we will get started, which means I have to tear down this entire filming setup and then re-put it all up so that you guys can see what I'm doing. The life of a YouTuber is fun. First off, I start by ironing my fabric. I am using duck canvas for the strength layer of this fabric. Dogs, why do you have to bark when I'm doing a voiceover? And the plaid you saw as the fashion fabric. I like to fuse my fabrics together when I'm making corsets. That way I don't have to worry about too many wrinkles. So I am using Heat Bond Light to fuse it together here, and I would not recommend using this for permanent fusing. I learned the hard way that it doesn't have a permanent adhesion to other fabrics. but I didn't have any of the usual fusible interfacing or adhesion stuff that I normally use for my corsets. So this had to work. Some cute dog shenanigans as I try to lint roll all of the dog hair off of the fabric. You first start adhering the glue to one side of your fabric. I'm doing that currently with my iron, just, you know, trying to make sure it's glued properly. And then you'll peel off the paper once you're finished and lay your other fabric on top of it and then iron that as well. This was an easy process. I feel like heat bond would be really good for corsetry if they had a heavier duty one. The light adhesion stuff just kind of unglued itself the more I ironed it, which was really annoying. So this was actually a moment of genius for me. I wasn't really sure how to pattern match with the duck canvas on top of the plaid fabric since I couldn't really see the pattern. So instead, I traced it. And to do that, I used this giant soft box that I got for Christmas. It was really annoying, but it's the reason that I was able to get the corsets so symmetrical. With the pattern on the duck canvas portion of the fabric, it was time to go ahead and trace my pieces. Since this doesn't have any seam allowance, I just traced around the pattern for the sewing line and then added the seam allowance. I like this method a lot because it makes sure that it's precise for corsetry, because in corsetry, even a millimeter can make a difference. And since I'm only using a single layer of fabric here, I had to flip the piece over and then do all of that tracing and seam allowance again in order to have two pieces. Because I was having so much issues with the light heat bond keeping the fabrics together, I found some clippings of Mighty Fuse, which is what I usually use from So Much Cosplay. I absolutely love this fabric, or not fabric. I absolutely love this like glue sheet. I'm not sure what to call it, but it's really amazing. The only problem is that I got a lot of the glue on my iron without noticing it, and then got it on the fabric piece, so I ended up having to cut out another one of these pieces. Either way, I know for the future not to use heat bond light anymore, so lesson learned. And then it was time to start pinning. So for this, I marked which side goes to which pieces, and I am only pinning panels 1 to 1, 2 to 3, and 4 to 5 for now. I find that if you work it in smaller chunks, it really helps. And to pin this, I am matching up the waists first and making sure it goes vertical as opposed to horizontal. Because I was saying, because millimeters do make a huge difference, and if you know that you're sewing exactly on that seam line, then you don't really have to worry about the sizing of your corset changing by accident. And then it was time to sew. So I sewed both one pieces together, so the front. Then I sewed panels 2 and 3 together and 4 and 5 together. Then I ironed those and then attached those sections to each other to complete the entire corset. And then I ironed that. When you're ironing a corset, you really want to make sure that you don't over iron the waist, because that's where a lot of your reduction is. Instead, you want to focus on the hip portion and the underbust portion separately. You also want to make sure that you iron both the front and the back so that you can get those curves lying how they should. One of the marks of good corsetry is when the hip stays open or has a nice shape to it without all of the bones. And then I did the same thing to the lining. This lining was my nightmare. I absolutely hated it. Currently you can see 2 bright blue marks and then a black mark where I was trying to find something that would mark this ugly satin, and I couldn't find anything that would work. So instead I use these friction pins, which disappear with heat. They mostly worked. It was really cool to use them to make the lines reappear later, because I needed to do that for the back pieces. You just pop it in the freezer. Really nifty. Either way, don't work with costume satin. It is the worst. So I'm just gonna skip most of this because I am just not having a good day reliving all of that. And then it was time to move on to the back panels. So I matched the lining up with the fashion fabric, which was really annoying because it was very slippery and it was very hard to get the seam lines to match, but I did my best. And then I made 2 separate bobbins, one with black thread and one with white thread, so that I could match the colors. If the plaid was front facing, I would use the white bobbin, and then if the lining was front facing, I would use the black bobbin and change out the top thread accordingly. With the back panels sewn together, it was time to iron them. This was also very annoying. Really, anything involving this lining fabric was annoying. Can I talk about how much I hated this lining fabric? Because I hated it. I'm not sure if you guys knew that or not yet, but I do. Anyway, so I ironed it as flat as possible, trying to make sure that the lining fabric wasn't showing in the front. Mostly successful. And then I trimmed down the seam allowances on the front. I also went ahead and marked these sewing lines, so where the bone placements would be on either side of the eyelets. I also marked the position of the eyelets. So corsetry eyelets are a really good thing to do when you're upset, because you get to bang a rubber mallet on some metal tools. So for the eyelet, you have what is called a grommet, which is the longer part of the eyelet, and then the smaller part is the washer. You want the washer to go on the lining fabric and the longer one to go through the fashion fabric. I also learned as I was doing this that you get a cleaner finish if you hammer it from the lining side. So what you're gonna do is use an awl or some sort of hole puncher to punch a hole in the fabric where you need the eyelet to go. You're going to place the grommet through the fashion fabric and then the washer on top of the grommet. And then you just bang it with the provided tools. If you're like me and you don't have a big enough awl, which is what that green tool is called, then you're going to have to cut some of the threads. I don't like doing this because it can hinder the strength of the fabric, and your eyelets can eventually unravel. But I mean, gotta do what you gotta do. In the famous words of Tim Gunn, make it work. And it was somewhere around here that I banged my hand with the with the rubber mallet. It was so much fun. Make sure that when you're doing eyelets that you're focused so that you don't bang your hand with a rubber mallet. I still have a bruise. Now that the eyelets are finished, it was time to connect the back panels to the rest of the corset. I started with the fashion side and just pinned those two seams together. I did this that way I could try it on without having the lining in it, so that if the underbust corset was too tight, I could let it out just a little bit. But it ended up being fine, so I went ahead and attached the lining. I have a feeling you guys are already going to guess what I have to say about this lining fabric. Here's a hint. It's awful. But anyway, as I was making this corset, I realized how horribly it frayed. So here I'm just trimming down the seams and applying fray check. That way, hopefully, the seams won't unravel too much. And then here you just see me attempting to match up the seam lines of the fashion fabric to the seam lines of the lining fabric. I realized later that this didn't really work. The lining fabric pulled the fashion fabric too tight and it was bunching up. So instead I wrapped it around my mannequin and tried to pin it flat that way. Wasn't great because she does not have a corseted waist, but it worked, and I think it turned out much better than it would have had if I would have went with this. And then I marked and sewed down the boning channels. I realized later that I had forgotten to sew in the middle of the seam, so I ended up doing that too. I'm also still using a white bobbin and then black top thread, so as to try to make the stitching a little less visible. I can talk, I promise. Before I did the boning, I went ahead and attached bias binding to the bottom of the corset edge. I sewed that down and then pinned the other side down. And then I moved on to boning. For boning, I'm using synthetic whalebone from Corsetry Supplies. I'm just kind of shoving it in my bone channels and then trimming it down. I used whalebone because you don't have to tip it. You just kind of make sure it's curved at the top. And then once the bones were in, I went ahead and finished off the bias binding by stitching in the ditch and then applying bias binding to the top edge in the same manner. And here is the finished corset. I'm pretty happy with it. More thoughts anon. Well, that was fun. Just kidding. So I am actually filming this outro and finishing up this corset on Monday, the day that I am supposed to upload this, at like 3 something. I wanted to upload this at 5. Well, we'll see how that goes. Either way, this corset has been so frustrating to make. And it's not even that bad of a corset. It actually turned out pretty well, being my second fully finished corset. So like, I don't hate it. I'll wear it. It's nice. It fits pretty well. I think I took a little bit too much out of the side seams. Or not side seams, out of the underbodice, but like it's a nice corset. It's nice. It gives me a nice waist reduction. It gives me a nice waist reduction. You can't really tell about the bubbles too much when it's on. Yeah, the pattern matching isn't great, but it was my first time pattern matching plaids, and I tried, and at least I got them symmetrical. So like it's mirrored on both sides. That at least looks really good. So that was a plus. But I just really hate this corset because of how frustrating it was to make it. I will never work with that fabric ever again. The lining fabric was awful. I want to throw it all in the trash, and I still have like an entire yard of it left. So working with the lining fabric was totally fun. Let's see, what else went wrong? Oh yeah, I smashed my hand on a grommet, or while putting in the grommets. That hurt. I have a nice bruise there. Still hurts. What else? A lot of stuff went wrong. I bled multiple times. Yeah, multiple times. I ended up cutting myself. My fingers feel awful because of all the pin pricks. Yeah, so it's just, I hate this corset simply because it was so frustrating to make. It's not a bad corset. It looks good. It feels good. I definitely wear it, but I think for now I'm gonna throw it in the back of my closet until I don't get mad when I look at it. This was not the foot I wanted to start these sewing vlogs off on. But hopefully, you know, we're at the down peak and then it's nothing but up from here. Here's hoping. Either way, I think that's all I have to say really. The corset turned out really nice. I really like the look of it. I'm just very frustrated at it for a moment, so I'd give it like a month before I pull it back out of the closet. And I'm not mad at it. It was an experience. I definitely learned never to use cheap satin or silk or whatever from Joann's costume section for lining on a fabric. The inside of this looks awful, by the way. You probably caught glimpses of it as I was doing other things, but it looks hideous. Thankfully, no one has to look on the inside, so there's that. And yeah, I'm just really ready to be done with this project and move on to my next sewing adventure. So I think that's what's gonna happen. Oh yeah, by the way, I have this one. This one, despite being too big in the upper bust, was a lot more fun to make. This is the Halloween one with the same pattern, just one of the different style lines. And this one, I was smart and lined it with cotton, which is so much easier to work with. Yeah, so lesson learned. Anyway, so next Monday's video is going to be all about good sewing habits. What are my good sewing habits? And what are some good sewing habits that I think every seamstress, costumer, cosplayer, corseteer needs? James, please quit eating the bits of fabric that's on my floor. You weird child. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so that's gonna be next Mondays, and then the next sewing vlog I have planned is actually a Wednesday Addams costume, which I am so excited for. I have all of the stuff for it. I just need to start making it. I've been in a rush to finish this corset, but I'm very excited. I'm gonna do some embroidery on the collar, and it's gonna be my first time embroidering, so we'll see how that goes. So if any of these videos interest you, or if you enjoyed this video, which I hope you did because I suffered through a lot of it, feel free to politely smash that like and subscribe button and stick around for the wonderful adventures we'll have within Winifred's wardrobe. For now, this is Winifred signing off for her very first sewing vlog, which was a complete disaster? I don't know, I got hurt a lot, so I'm not too happy about it. But either way, the first one is over and done with, so there's that hurdle crossed, and now I can move on to better and happier and calmer and less painful sewing vlogs. So I look forward to having you guys join me on those. And my dogs are apparently excited to have you along as well. They will always be here. They are a constant annoyance, but they are adorable, so we put up with them. Either way, I hope you guys have a great week. I will see you next week. Goodbye. I'm gonna go take this corset off now and throw it in my closet. Stage fright. Oh, you brought their treats. Then you dropped one on me. Hi.
Hey.
Okay, what's making you go crazy? Is it the chair? Oh no, it's my buttons. Ha. You have lint on your finger and on your toast. Come back.
Roughage.